Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to the live stream. Hello. I assume we have people here from the Discord, but if you've joined us from anywhere else, my name is Carson Long. This is Writing Theory, and today we're going to have some fun. We're going to talk some story. You're going to ask questions. We're all going to discuss the answers, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel like you'll have a good time. You will have had a good time, maybe I should say. That you'll want to join in a future live stream, and that, hey, if you were writing while doing this, put me on in the background, I hope you made some good progress. I'm still figuring out the live stream thing, so give me your feedback. I'm down here in the basement. I never know what the internet situation's going to be like, if there's going to be a big delay between what you say, what I say. I keep my eye on the chat. First off, I think it's super cool that you guys even care to talk to me. So, hey, thank you for that. Yeah, that's the plan today. So, let's go ahead. Let's bring it over to Big Carson is what this this scene is called. Let's talk about what the plan is today. Because last time we did a live stream, I had no idea what was going to happen. If it was going to be something where, like, no one said anything and I was just here talking for 2 hours, or if there was going to be all kinds of activity and we could all have just like good conversations, talk about different things, and it ended up being the structure that I was trying to do. Didn't really need that much because everyone was so into what we were doing. So, because of that, I was thinking that today we could do some Q&A. Anyone who's attending here can ask some questions, maybe about something that you're currently working on, or something that you feel like you've been getting stuck on recently in your writing. And then as long as we can sort of categorize this bad boy while we're going through the live stream, I can take big chunks of this live stream, put it up on YouTube. So someone who just wants to get a bunch of general plot, bunch of general character advice, a bunch of general writing advice, I can say, hey, here's like the video for a bunch of random great writing advice. And then if we get through all that and we have no more questions, our brains are exhausted, then I'm going to keep talking about something we were talking about in the previous live stream, which was the plot term iceberg. You see all these different terms in plot frameworks. Everyone's trying to coin their own little term of, you know, here's what makes my plot framework specifically different than other people's. We're going to go through and say, here's every plot framework has these terms. You need to be familiar with them. And then as we get deeper and deeper and deeper and more complex, hopefully at the end of that video, you would understand what's happening. Hello, everyone in the chat. I see we have Martin. Martin, thanks for joining us. Martin with like 1,800 rated books on Goodreads or something insane like that. That blows my mind. We got Rye, thank you so much for joining us. Wow. Listening while you drive home. I hope my voice is soothing, but not too soothing that you swerve off the road. 200 subs away from 10K. I know. That's insane to me. Okay, I gotta tell you, when I started the YouTube channel, the first video I put out got like 8 views, right, in that first week. And then I put out another video because I was like, hey, this thing's kind of fun. I'm kind of figuring out how to do things. Hello, Kiera, if I'm pronouncing that right. And I put that one out, and it was like a passion project, right? It was like, okay, here's my second video. I'm starting to figure things out. The third one, I just whipped out my phone while me and my wife were out sledding in the backyard, being pulled behind the UTV, going around turns, and I put out my phone and I was like, I'm going to do a video intro right now. And so I'm sliding on this big sled and I'm like, here's 3 tips for avoiding boring writing, just off the top of my head. Because I was like, this is kind of a cool opportunity. Everyone who's not in the, up north probably doesn't get to go sledding, being pulled behind a UTV in their backyard all the time. I don't know if anyone here saw that video, 3 tips to avoid boring writing. That video got like 50,000 views in the next couple weeks. And it is all because I whipped out that phone and said that goofy little intro as I was going around these curves on this little racetrack that we had plowed in the backyard. that video did well. And then me and my wife were like, should I like try to do this kind of thing? And now we're 200 away from 10,000 subscribers. You know, in those early days, I set myself a bunch of goals, right? I was like, if YouTube could be like a big thing, when I hit 10,000 subscribers, I'm going to have like a really cool event planned. And boy, do I. I am telling you guys, if you are not in the Discord, you're going to want to be in the Discord before too long. I got something special planned for the 10,000 subscriber mark. I've been working with some people to get everything, all the details ironed out. It may still take another little bit, another month or month and a half of ironing out all the details. And then Writing Theory is popping off. We're going to do some really cool community things. So all of that is because of you guys. So thank you for, giving me a chance. You never know what's going to happen when you're following a small creator. Maybe they go off and do another thing and they get a job and they can't put time into it anymore. Maybe they decide to give it a shot. And here we are. So cool. Kiara says, joined yesterday. So glad to hear that. I hope you've liked it so far. It goes through waves of like super crazy activity. And then as people are just having questions and popping up in our next writing challenge, I'm expecting a lot of really great story conversation when we do that. Be there or be square. Random Writer, welcome to the stream. Oh, I said writing retreat. I may have accidentally said writing retreat. I can't remember. I meant writing challenge. Writing retreat, though, where would be the... All right, everyone, what's your... If someone was like, I'm going to pay for your trip to go travel somewhere and finish your book, where would you choose to go for a big writing retreat? Would you go to a beach? Would you go up on a mountain somewhere? Would you go out in the wilderness? Or would you go to like New York City and write in some cafes? Jeff Long. Hello, Jeff. Hello. I gotta say, there's something appealing to me of the idea of like going to finish my like a book or a draft or something in like Paris. Go to all those shops that like Hemingway hung out at, and who were the other big authors at the time? F. Scott Fitzgerald, and all of those. My writing history may not be as up to date as as it should be. Greece or New England? Ooh, I've been to Greece. Greece would be a great place to go to, especially if you get out of Athens and into some of these like island sort of like smaller places. Of course, anywhere I would go in Greece was a little touristy because that's how I found out about it. Phantom says, I just stay in my room 24/7. Great news. You're going to be able to finish your book this week. Mountain or out somewhere in a cafe, somewhere with no distractions. Martin, don't you work in a library? I feel like there's not many distractions in the library. You could just hole up there at night. Ted says go to Ireland. Oh, Ireland has a soft spot in my heart because I was 1 week away from moving to Ireland to get my master's degree before the pandemic hit. 1 week away. I'd already made down payments on health insurance and tuition at this place. What could have been? French Alps would be cool. Seeing lots of mountains here. Lots of mountains. What is the... I'm seeing no beach. No beach choices here. No one wants to go write a book at in a little cabana. Cabana? There are many distractions at the library. Trust me, lots of kids. Kick them out of here. Switzerland like Mary Shelley. Oh, that would be cool. Lots of really cool options. New England. I find that really interesting. New England. Very interesting. I think we need to plan a writing theory retreat. Interesting. Well, here's the thing. I never knew this would happen. Turns out we got people from all over the dang world who follow writing theory. The sand would piss me off. I don't like sand. It's coarse. Gets everywhere. Got cold place with lots of trees. What would be a cold place with lots of trees? Serbia? You can go write a book in Serbia. You can set up in the gulag. Rye says, I live in Florida. Frick the beach. Key West. Never been to Key West. I'd like to go to Key West. I don't know if I could write exactly like Hemingway does. I'm kind of a lightweight. And I think he just like sets a boat out and drinks. But you know what? Hey, it worked for him. Who knows? Maybe I'm one bottle of bourbon from writing like Hemingway. Northwest, cool with a lot of trees. Amy, welcome to the live stream. All right. Well, everyone, thank you for joining. I think what I learned in the last live stream was that if I sit here and I start talking about story stuff, and as we hit different things in all of these little story tips and terms and conversations, the questions that come up kind of derail from the overall conversation. And so I never finished that topic. And I'd like to be able to take clips from this, post it in the on the YouTube channel and say, here's a big conversation about plots. So today we're going to try something new. We are going to tackle a couple different topics sequentially. And if you have any questions regarding plot, regarding characters, and then after we hit those two separate topics, right? So any questions you have about plot specifically, then after we feel like we've done a good job there, talk about characters specifically, and then it's a free-for-all after that. Then we're going to go back to the plot term framework. I hope that sounds good. I'm going to talk a little bit about plot generally, specifically about some really cool plot frameworks that I encountered in doing research for one of my videos. And if you have any questions, any things you've been struggling with in your own drafts, in your own proto drafts, if you're editing, if you're just planning a story and you don't know where to go for your story, you don't know how to take your story to that next plot point, to that next event that needs to happen, that next story beat, ask it in the chat, because not only will I try to do my best to answer those, but if you've been in the Discord, we have a ton of very knowledgeable, very awesome writers in this chat too. So, good conversation to have here. I appreciate every comment you guys add here. It makes me feel like we're doing something really cool here. Pilot Alec Watchman, let's go! Welcome to the stream. All right. So let me click over here. Let's go to our standard screen. And I'm going to talk a little bit about something that I think is incredibly interesting, but I don't know how to work it into a video. All right. And again, hit me with your plot questions. All right. There is a plot framework that no one knows about, but it may be the most detailed, the most structured, the most straightforward plot framework I've ever seen. All right. It is called, I can't remember this dude's name. It is called the Pulp Fiction Plot Framework. What's his name? Who is he? There is one old dime novel, Lester Dent. Oh, Lester, we found you. If anyone saw, there's a video I did just trying something new, a different new format, where I just talked about like 10 plot frameworks in 9 minutes. Just rapid fire. Here's what it is. Here's what it looks like. Bah, 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 bah. And I found the Lester Dent Pulp Formula. And I don't know if this is the move for being able to do like a writing challenge or something based upon this, but this is all about the dime novel. Has anyone here ever heard of dime novels, or even better, read a dime novel? I was going to do a whole video on like the history of the dime novel and how we could how we could learn from them. So I picked up like the 2 best-selling dime novels of all time, and I started reading through them. And I gotta tell you, it must have been the dang Wild West in terms of like writing theory, not the channel, but the idea, right? Because this first story that I read was like, it took like 16 pages before we knew the names of the characters that we were experiencing, right? It was third person, so we weren't in anyone's head, but that was a very strange choice, especially when you're only working with like a total of like 40 pages. Rice says, I found plot frameworks only make no sense when I haven't had my story fully fleshed out as I thought. I started writing a script today, not for this week's video, not for next week's video, but for the one after that, on how to stop planning and start writing. I think from what I've seen from a lot of people in the Discord and in the chat, this could be a very useful video, so I hope it helps you. All right, so let's talk about Lester Dent's plot formula. Oh, we got a question from Vampiria Otis. Question, how does one go about following plot points for a potential trilogy in writing, specifically for a morally gray, complex protagonist? All right, so here's one thing. Maybe one of the very first things I want to say about plot and plot frameworks is that depending on the story you want to tell, different plot frameworks are going to work for your story. So unless you are proactively saying, I'm going to write a story with this specific plot framework, and like maybe you love Save the Cat, and it helps you to say, here's like the outline, now I need to fill inside all these lines with all the details of how my story is going to work. I found it more effective personally to be able to say, here's how I understand my story. Here's naturally, I think, how I want to tell the story. Here's like a big conflict in the middle. Here's like the big climax at the end. Okay, you know what? That's a 3-act story. Introduction, conflict in the middle, climax at the end. I think it's important to go from understanding your story always comes first, understanding your story, and then seeking out a plot framework to help you pick out all those details. Because not everything's hero's journey. Not everything is going to be Save the Cat. Not everything is going to be a 3-act or 4-act or 7 acts or, whatever all the different plot frameworks are. How do you go about following plot points for a potential trilogy? I have a great video I'm very proud of. It's called How to Plan a Series with Rob J. Hayes. The first time I've ever worked with like a professional author, and it was super cool, and the video was super rewarding. And one of the things I learned in talking with them is there is no difference in planning a single standalone story or a series. What you do is you kind of zoom out, and instead of looking at something like, here's a 3-act single standalone story, your 3-act single standalone story becomes the entire plot of your series, and each one of those acts is now a book in your trilogy. And then you just sort of zoom in. It was maybe it wasn't John Garner. I think it was Sean Coyne in Story Grid that talks about this idea of like story recursiveness. It's the idea that like, okay, your book has an inciting incident, a crisis, a climax, and a resolution. Well, if we zoom in to each act of your book, it also has an inciting incident, a crisis, a climax, and a resolution. If we zoom into a sequence of scenes, we can also try to apply that same idea. And I found that really interesting when I was thinking of how to plan a series versus a standalone story. Max Scar says, is it possible to have too many plot twists, assuming they're properly foreshadowed, and move the plot along rather than interrupting it? How many until it becomes disengaging rather than engaging? All right, so fantastic question. I love that, Max. Is it possible to have too many plot twists? Whew, okay, so here's the thing. When I think of plot twists, a couple things come to mind. The very first thing is like, okay, when I think back to kids' books, especially Goosebumps, Goosebumps has a plot twist or some kind of jump scare equivalent at the end of every single chapter. There's a masterclass video with, oh crap, what's his name? With R.L. Stein, that's it. Strange dude, but good writing advice. He specifically talks about having every chapter end with the main character thinking they're dying, thinking they've uncovered like some extremely important information or something equivalent to that. And that always makes you want to flip over to the next chapter, right? Now that's a kid's book. How do we apply that to maybe some older fiction? It kind of comes down to what kind of story you're telling in regards to like another kind of thing I think about when it comes to plot twists is like TV, right? I'm rewatching Lost right now, and every single episode basically has what in the trope world is called a wham line or a wham episode. And that's the moment where it feels like everything's changed. That's like the big plot twist. And they do it every single episode. I'm still trying to figure out what's the best way to make that happen in your book. I would say, unless your plot twists feel cheap and not thought out, then if they do feel good, if they feel like they're purposeful in the story, then by all means, stick them in there and make a very addicting story. When in doubt, if you feel like you're overdoing it, this is probably an application of less is more, right? Then I would try to maybe reserve my plot twists for each act of my story. In fact, the Lesser Dent plot formula mentions something about plot twists. At the end of each one of their parts, out of 4 total parts, here's plot twist 1, plot twist 2, plot twist 2, part 2, maybe plot twist 3. There's always some kind of plot twist there. So that would be my recommendation is if you feel like it's too much, less is more. Try to put it in these natural, sort of locations in your story, like a 3-act kind of structure. End cap each one of those with a plot twist. All right, we got lots of comments in here. Suggestion for future video, Ted. Perhaps you can create a video which shows which framework works with which plot. That's a good idea. I like that. Ari says, I'm here, but just listening. Well, you're here in our hearts, too. All right. Vampire, gonna check out the video. Love that. Love that. Gabby says, by zooming out and using the same book strategy for a book series, how do you avoid the boring book 2 trope? Specifically speaking of trilogies, I find that the second book is often kind of boring. All right, here's a question for you guys. If you feel like there's this sort of sophomore syndrome, the second book doesn't seem to hold up in the same way as the first book, what do you think the reason for that is? Let me know. I have my theories, but I want to see what you guys think. Gabby continues because it would be the rising action bit with the descend bit. A book, a bunch of stuff going wrong until the end. Okay. How would I go about plotting the second act of my book? Random writer, we're going to get to that one. That's a good question. What makes for a good plot twist? Okay. We got some good stuff here. I want to see what you guys have. You're probably typing it in now. There's a little bit of delay. Why do you think that second book falters? In music, they call it sophomore syndrome, sophomore album syndrome, and dog's scratching behind me. In music, they said the second album is the true test for a musician because you have your whole life to plan out your first album, and then you only have like a year to plan out your second album. Vampiria says, I think the second book introduces too many new characters and can be overwhelming. Okay, I've seen things like that before in second books. I'm trying to think specifically, what are some second books that I feel like maybe dropped the ball? I know Wheel of Time has a lot of middle books that are like kind of tough to get through. I'm not seeing too many other recommendations here. I'll say what I think, right? So, second book, and a second book that maybe doesn't feel as strong as the first or last book is almost related to Random Writer's question. How do I go about plotting the second act of my book? I have my beginning nailed down, and the third act kind of mapped out, and the middle is kind of mushy. Well, when we think about story recursiveness, kind of applies here too, right? Second act of your story it does a lot of heavy lifting, right? It's everything between the beginning that sets everything off and the big culmination of everything, the climax, right? That second act has all of the hard stuff as a writer, right? Same thing in a series if you believe in that idea of story recursiveness. Atlas says, I feel like the second book often feels like the author just had two stories and not one story split into two parts. Interesting. So here's let's talk about both of these. I'm gonna talk about Random Writer's question of how do you write the second act of a book, which is, I think, a very good question. And I kind of believe, I can't remember where I saw this number. It's probably some plot framework somewhere, maybe a 3-act story, that says Act 1 of your story is 25% of your story. Act 3 of your story is 25% of your story, which means Act 2 is everything in between. Half of your whole book is considered this Act 2. And after you've done your inciting incident and your climax, that's everything in Act 2. Right? So 50% of your book, if you look at a lot of different plot frameworks, just calls it rising action. Isn't that insane? 50% of your book is hardly represented in a lot of these plot frameworks. Save the Cat and Hero's Journey are a little different. They go into a lot of detail. So how do you make sure that middle 50 is done well? Well, I'll tell you what I did. In the planning for my next book, not the one that's coming out now. Oh, the book that's about to come out? Are you asking about that? Oh, well, let me tell you. Let me put my water bottle down. For those who don't know, I have a book coming out in 5 days. Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs, cozy fantasy book. Pick it up if you want to support the channel and the Discord. All that good stuff. Let's talk about Act 2 here, because Act 2 in this book was purely me trying to set up moments that would pay off at the end of the book. But it was also like exploring character interactions. But 50% of that book was all me saying, let's establish our characters. Let's establish the flaws, the things that they want that would be like good resolutions towards the end of the story. And then as we work to the climax, we can resolve these little questions and seeds and storylines that we built up in the middle 50. After doing that, planning for my next book, what I decided to do was to take the middle 50% and break it into 3. And this is not a cozy fantasy book. This is an urban fantasy, much more like exciting. But now for a second act, what I did is for this upcoming book is I broke it into 3 main sort of events or conflicts or major story beats. And then I treated that like a new 3-act story, right? I had these 3 important things I wanted to happen. Now I could work on sort of zooming in a little bit and just saying what needs to happen between the start of Act 2 and this first major plot beat that we're talking about here. And then what needs to happen in the next one, what needs to happen in the next one. I found that to be really helpful. So that's what I'm trying in my next book. I am breaking the second act, this 50% of my book, into thirds and having major beats sort of happen in each one of those thirds. I hope that helps a little bit, because the middle 50 is probably the hardest part of writing a story, right? First off, it's the majority of your story. Let's see what else we got. I have a question. This is from Sia Mori. I have a question. Did you have much problem with creating the end of your book? I'm having a block for my ending. And do you have a plan for a video about that? That is a really good question. For me, the ending of the book, I kind of knew there needed to be some sort of trial for the characters in my book. Not like a judgment, right? But in a situation like in my story, we have these talking dogs, right? We're trying to find them new homes. That's like the whole deal, right? So I knew what the story kind of needed was to separate the dogs from their protectors, the 2 main characters in our story, and give them a chance to be on their own and watch them succeed, right? That's a feel-good ending, knowing that these dogs, even on their own, have personalities that like really shine through in moments of conflict. And so I had a vision for this, right? As I was writing, it just sort of made sense where I was leading the story, that we would have this big climactic moment. If you don't have that vision in your head, still write. Do your proto draft and start writing, even if you don't know exactly what the ending of the book is going to be. If you do, great. If you don't, though, as you're writing, you have a lot of book to get through before you get to the end, right? As you're writing, you're going to start to figure out this sort of thing. Like, naturally, how should this story resolve, right? And if you don't get that sort of feeling of naturally understanding how a story would resolve, next time you're watching a movie or reading a book, read it or watch it intentionally. Think about the story decisions that were being made here. Think about, if you're watching Indiana Jones: The Last Crusade, if you're in the middle of the movie, try to figure out where it makes sense for this thing to go next. Indiana Jones and his dad have gotten a little closer. Well, one of them should be put in danger and the other one needs to save them. Are they both going to come through for each other? Try to feel out what that natural sort of story conclusion would be. 5 days. 5 days. 5 days. Twists are fine if it makes sense. If you're doing a twist for the sake of a twist, don't. Bad example, in my opinion, of one is Where the Crawdads Sing. Something that boggles my mind. If you don't know the book Where the Crawdads Sing, it may be the highest selling book of this decade. When you go and look at the amount of ratings and reviews on Goodreads and on Amazon, I think it's got 250,000. It's insane. One of those books that just hit every single reading. I mean, I could rant about it. It's crazy. It's crazy to me. All right. So let me talk to you about Lester Dent's plot formula. Maybe we're going to encounter some things here that bring up some more questions. So Lester Dent, I told you I was doing all this research for a book on dime novels. I feel like there's a really good video in there and something we can learn. I just don't know what it is yet. I'm trying. So Lester Dent was a writer in a dime novel. Hot takes: did not like Where the Crawdads Sing. Pretty hot take. About 250,000 people would want to fight you on that. I don't know if that's the real number, but all right. So Lester Dent was a dime novelist, and this was in the 1940s. The dime novel was kind of coming to an end. The era of the dime novel. The first dime novels came out in the late 1800s, and this is crazy to me. Dime novels in the United States started coming out. And in the midst of, from my research, which could always be wrong, they were passed around Civil War camps. And that was one of the main forms of entertainment when you're just sitting in camp in the woods, for however many months in the snow, freezing. At least you could read, I wish I could remember the name, Lyeska. Maybe that was the dime novel one I picked up. So Lester Dent, this is 1940s, I think about, and Lester Dent he was a very prolific dime novel artist, author, and here's what he did. He said, I'm going to create, dime novels need to be 6,000 words. That's the perfect length. I'm going to create the plot framework for all of my other writers at this company who's doing dime novels, that we can all make sure we get all the necessary information as, concisely and fine as we can. So he created this plot framework, and I think this is super interesting. I might try to write a 6,000 word story using this. He breaks apart his plot framework into 4 parts. Each part is 1,500 words, total of 6,000 words, right? And look at how specific this is. First line. The very first line of your story should introduce your hero and the trouble that they're in. Name a book. Name a book. Name a book that is that efficient. Because I think stories should be like this. I would love to pick up an action book, action adventure, Indiana Jones, James Bond style book, and just get that kind of efficient story. First line, introduce your hero and the trouble that they're in. Don't waste time. First paragraph, expand on the situation that they're in. And then jump into the action. I don't know if it's my background of being a technical writer that makes me like this idea of just like getting right to the story. There's something here. There's something here. Bring in the allies, have an altercation. You need to have action in your story to keep the reader invested, especially in a dime novel when you're competing with the world around the person just popping open the book for a little bit. First thing we can take from this, achieving something. When I think of the last couple stories I've read, I have a hard time. Let's say the book I'm reading right now is called Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang, I think. And first off, it is a very fantastic book. I don't know if there is a single moment where the hero achieves a positive thing. It's all fighting against the negative. Maybe in our stories, we should have more moments where it feels satisfying that our hero has done something good as opposed to always being in conflict. I don't know. Sev knew the day would be hard when he had to kill the same person twice. That sounds familiar. Have you shared that in the Discord before? Or have I read this first line somewhere? It's a good line. I like that. Can this be applied to something like comics? Here's the great thing about plot frameworks. They are narrative structures, not just book structures, not movie structures, not specifically comic structures, but any sort of story that you're trying to tell, you can kind of follow this. Imagine instead of first 1,500 words, it says first 25% of your story, right? I think it can definitely be applied for comics. How much time I wasted getting through the first 200 pages of exposition of Tangerine, only to realize the final 100 pages were the only pages that literally anything important happened. Well, my friend, maybe stop reading tangerines. Pick up an orange, pineapple. Expand your horizons. Read a cucumber. And then in the first 1,500 pages, we cap it off with a plot twist. So our question that we had about plot twists. Oh, also someone here, it was that pilot Alex Watchman, just mentioned Six of Crows. I've heard good things about Six of Crows. I've been wondering whether or not I should pick it up. I've heard good things and I've heard okay things. I don't know. Let me know what you think. If you've read it, let me know in the Discord. All right. Part 2 of Lester Dent says, okay, we've gotten past the introductions. Now let's up the tension. Show our characters struggling. Have a surprise. Now you might be asking, what's the difference between a surprise and a twist? It seems like this in Lester Dent's plot formula. The minor surprise here almost seems like a red herring kind of jump scare. Just something to keep the reader on their toes. I don't know how I feel about that. Gabby likes Six of Crows. Good to know. Good to know. I've heard some people say really good things. I've heard some people kind of trash it as like a book talk book. I don't know if I believe that. It seems I see more positive things than negative things. I'm just messing with you about the tangerine stuff. By 2,000 words, you should have introduced all of your main characters and established all the main elements of your story. Someone asked about this plot framework. I guess maybe also the ideas of plot frameworks, if you can apply this to a comic book. I can tell you right now that this kind of thing, introducing all of your characters so early on in the story, the main elements of your story, this is done all the time in movies. Okay? So like famously, Princess Bride introduces every single main character and sort of a peek into their personality within like the first, I can't remember if it's 10, 15 minutes in the book or in the movie. Famously just gets right to the point. And I love that. I try to do that sort of thing in my books. I think that there's something beautiful in just like getting all the information out there and moving on. Honestly, unless you have a very specific vision for your introduction, it might be better. It might be better to just get through it and get to the meat and potatoes of your story. I talk about that in my video that's coming out tomorrow, I think. Part 3 of Lester Dent and Kanto. Part 3, Lester Dent says, no way out. This is where crank up the tension. This is kind of like the climax of your story in part 3 here. Crank up the tension, have another altercation, another fight, basically, in the terms of Pulp Fiction. And another plot twist. This one's pretty easy. Definitely this framework is weighted to the first part. I saw this first part of this framework and I was like, oh my God, I'm getting into something that's going to be like, this is the plot framework I needed. It breaks every single thing down. But then part 3 is just kind of blah. Again, the same issue of a plot framework being like, hey, this part of your story is the rising action. Good luck. Makes me so mad. Now with dime novels, because this was meant to be addictive writing with dime novels, which is something I've been working so hard on in the past, I don't know, 2.5 years to nail down this idea of addicting writing. I would love to do a deep video into what people think makes stories addicting. And I've asked that question a few times in the Discord, trying to piece things together. One day it'll come to me. One day. Sia Mori says, I tried Mistborn and Way of the King first chapters, and I think Brandon Sanderson have a weird and interesting way of writing. It feels like third person and kind of first person, or in between. What do you think? Most of Sanderson's stories are, I guess they'd be called omniscient third person. I don't really care for all the technical answers for that on perspective stuff. But a lot of his stories, each chapter will sort of choose a main character to be in their head. It's not first person. We're not using the word I. But a main character to be in their head, maybe get a glimpse of their thoughts and their perspective and how they react to certain things. But outside of that one character, even if there's other characters in the scene that maybe we have gotten their perspective in the past, we kind of keep outside of everyone's head. So every chapter, at least in my recent experiences with Brandon Sanderson stuff, especially with book 2 of Mistborn, and all of Stormlight Archives, right? We have one main character that we're experiencing from, and we kind of get that view in their head. That's when you're in that third person omniscient, or this is third person limited, sorry. Third person limited says, here's one character we're kind of attached to. So that's what I think, maybe it feels like kind of between first and third person. It's because we're not being, we are not the character, but we still understand what they're thinking, which is pretty popular. It's, I think it's a good perspective to use. I use it a lot. This is also the same thing that George R.R. Martin does. You could study any of the Game of Thrones books, any of the Song of Ice and Fire books with George R.R. Martin, because he has scenes, and I think this is fascinating. I think this is incredible, right? He has scenes where his stories are all third person. We're not in any single person's head, but each chapter we're in third person. I think it's limited, right? We get to hear what, Jon Snow thinks and feels and how he reacts to information, and we're in his head. But then in another scene, maybe we'll be in a chapter where Jon Snow is present and all of these other, Ned Stark's present, Robb Stark's present, all these other characters that we have been in their heads before. But in this chapter, we'll be in someone else's head. And I think it's so interesting about how did George R.R. Martin decide what perspective character to view this scene from? Because we could have been in Jon Snow's head. We could have been in Robb Stark's head. We could have been in Ned Stark's head. But we were in, Arya's head. You can definitely study some George R.R. Martin for perspective stuff. Call Me Zed says, I've read some comics that like the first chapter, you get introduced to the main characters. The next chapter, they shove 6 to 7 side characters in at the same time. It can happen in some books, too. It can happen in some books, but I think different mediums, just like different genres, will have that same sort of like different expectations for how you introduce your characters. Comic books, I think, famously would be like, hey, here's a bunch of characters for you to figure out at the same time. And they would do that because you visually can see each one of those characters and break them apart and understand who is who. However, if you're in a book, sometimes it's harder to piece together a whole bunch of different people at the same time because it's all happening in your head, not on the page. So that could be a difference in medium for sure. Cassandra says, hey, I love your videos. I had a question. I'm writing a novel and my character's brother just died. That's what started things that leads to a horror sad book. So is that a good conflict or is it passive? Okay, so Sean Coyne. So this sounds like your inciting incident, right? Conflict is part of inciting incident. This is why we got to talk about these plot term icebergs. Your inciting incident can kind of be whatever you want, but I've seen Sean Coyne say that there are two kinds of inciting incidents. There is causal, C-A-U-S-A-L, causal inciting incidents, meaning someone does something that kicks off the actions of the story. This person enlists in the military, or this person points a gun at someone and shoots, or this person actively does something that's going to kick off the rest of the story. And then there's incidental inciting incidents. Does that make sense? These are things that are out of the control of the characters. Your idea of like, is this too passive? It's totally okay to have an inciting incident be passive. This is any kind of story like The Wheel of Time in fantasy. The inciting incident for that whole book is that our main character may be this like wanted legendary magic user. I'm trying not to spoil anything. And people are trying to hunt him down. He has no, he doesn't do anything to cause that to happen. It just happens around him and then pulls our character into the story. You can absolutely have an inciting incident that is something that's just happening to the characters. The movie 2012, this big world-ending disaster movie. What did our characters do to cause all this? Absolutely nothing. The world just started ending. Independence Day with Will Smith and other people. How does that movie start? What's the inciting incident there? Aliens are attacking. What could our main characters do to cause or not cause that? Not a dang thing. That's the inciting incident and kicks off everything else. So it doesn't really matter if your inciting incident is passive or active. It's a decision that you make. You could expand this into a conversation about, is there one that's better, passive or active? My answer to that is no, there isn't, as long as your character can decide to be active or passive through their actions as the book progresses. Active characters are better than passive characters, for sure. For sure. All right. Any other questions on plot? All right. All right. Thanks so much for elaborating on the inciting incident. I got you. That's what you get here at a Writing Theory live stream. You get to ask questions, you get answers, and hey, check out the Discord if you haven't already. That's another great place to ask people for advice. About Third Person Limited, pilot Alex Watchman says, there are entire books on the main story in Wings of Fire told from little-known side characters' POV. A very unique instance of choosing POV. Yeah, definitely. I don't know how I feel about that. As a reader, when I get to POVs like that, I'm like, why do I care? Get me back to my main character that I love, right? Brandon Sanderson in The Way of Kings has his book broken into parts, and after a part ends and before the next part starts, we almost always get a handful of, a handful of like these little excerpts and side stories and that seemingly don't have anything to do with the main storyline that we're currently experiencing. I haven't finished the Stormlight Archive series. I'm not caught up, but I have had friends tell me that they do matter in the end. Here, give me 1 second. I gotta turn a fan on. I'm getting hot in here. We back. Interludes, yes. Thank you, Amy. That's definitely the word. Don't know how I missed that one. Snowfall's book was a huge surprise. She was previously a side character, and everyone thought that they'd hate her, but her book was so good that now people love her. That's the dream. If you can pull that off as an author, that's got to feel good. I wouldn't know. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. I can appreciate a good spin-off. You know what I mean? Good spin-off story. Let's talk about Hero's Journey. Someone, and I can't remember who, this was just something I've picked up at some point in my life, has famously said that every story can be turned into the hero's journey. That's not true. Definitely not true. Let's see if I can find a good one. We're going to talk about Hero's Journey. I think that when you're starting to learn about plots, you kind of hear about Hero's Journey pretty quickly. It's got a really catchy name, you know? And because of that, you might go to this plot framework first as you're learning about things. Yeah, I heard someone once say that every story can be like put into the framework of the hero's journey, and I don't agree. I don't know if you agree or not, but I think the hero's journey tells one very popular kind of story, especially what we see most of the time in cinema. So like Dune could probably be put here in Hero's Journey. Lord of the Rings can be put here in Hero's Journey. Star Wars can be put here in Hero's Journey. So I don't know if every story. I definitely think Hero's Journey can fall short when it comes to things like when you have more than one character who's like the main character, right? So we're going to talk about this. Maybe there's some things that pop up here. And then we're going to switch over to character stuff. I hope we have some good character questions. Yeah. Having too much fun for this. I've been figuring out live streaming slowly but surely. Now I have some little buttons on my phone that let me switch scenes. I'm getting better. I'm getting better. I'm practicing. All right, so Hero's Journey. Let's talk about Hero's Journey. How about someone like Kratos? Expand on that. Expand on that. How about someone like Kratos? Raz says, I think people get heroes and protagonists confused. Heroes are often protagonists, but protagonists are not always heroes. Zed says he's a hero, but not technically a good guy. Sounds like we got some things happening in chat here that are very, very thematically tied together. Who is a hero? Who is a protagonist? Right? When you're going through your literature class, whether it's in high school, whether it's in college, they're going to say your protagonist is your main perspective character. And your protagonist should have an antagonist. That's good to help understand how stories can work. It's definitely not like a rule that you need to follow. Now, I do think that a story is more relatable when you have one person who can sort of signify the antithetical qualities to your theme and your main character, and your antagonist would serve to do that. Heroes and villains are archetypes. Do I pronounce that word right? Archetypes? That's right, right? Someone validate me. I need validation in chat. Need validation, please? Thank you. Hey, it's Paint Games. I don't know anything. Just want to say I'm truly enjoying the Discord community. I've been slowly writing through my world. I love to hear that. Hey, we're glad you're here. We're almost at 300 members in the Discord. Boo? That's insane. That's insane. Okay. Back to protagonists, archetypes, heroes, villains. Your protagonists, you don't have to have just one protagonist. You can have multiple. Same thing with antagonists. Honestly, I toss these terms out the window. Personally, I have characters, right? And I think the more morally gray that you want to make your characters, especially your main perspective character, the more murky the waters come on this idea of like who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's the protagonist, who's the antagonist. Oh, protagonist is the main character person. Antagonist is their opposite. It's their foil. Why do you... I guess the question is, for me, I never know why it matters for us to identify a protagonist. I would just like to have characters I can pick apart and understand. You know what I mean? J Sam, welcome. Says, I got here late. Any advice on blurbs? Oh, J Sam, I got great news. I just today finished editing the video on the blurb for, this guy. Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs, my debut book that comes out in 5 days. You can order this on Amazon. Ebook is out for pre-order. Physical copies available on August 20th. I just did the video all about the process of publishing this, including choosing a title, choosing a cover, and choosing a blurb. I'll give you a quick rundown. Let me get out of this back to normal. Quick rundown with blurbs. Your blurb, the analogy I make in your video, your title and your cover, that's like the big sign on the side of a restaurant that helps someone figure out, hey, I want Italian food. This is an Italian restaurant. I can tell by the big sign or the title and the cover. And you walk up to the window. They have their menu plastered up on the wall. Your blurb is that menu. That book title, that book cover helps you understand what kind of book this is. This is a science fiction book. This is a crime thriller, a murder mystery, a romance book. And that blurb, that menu up on the wall, lets people know if the contents of that book is up to their taste. Does that make sense? So your blurb needs to say, here are the major themes. Here are the major tropes. Here's what this book is about. Here's what makes my book unique. More on that, not this Friday, next Friday. Love me some blurbs. Sia Mori says, is it bad that all questions in a story be answered in one big scenario that has been foreshadowed? Interesting. If you were to ask that question 20 years ago, I would say almost all of your questions need to have answers by the end of your book. Things are different now. And again, we can thank big old Brandon Sanderson, for sort of introducing this term to the big lexicon of the world. Read and find out. RAFO. R-A-F-O. It's becoming a lot more common now, especially as we get to morally gray situations in books and stories and characters, that not all questions need to be answered. It's okay if you ask a question in one book and you don't necessarily answer it. If you're in a series, you should do your best to answer those questions from book one at some later point. It can feel a little unsatisfying to get to the end of your series and be like, but wait, the island was purgatory the whole time? That's a Lost reference. Thank you. Spoilers. On antagonist, Danish Pastry says, on antagonist versus protagonist thing, if the protagonist is the main character, then I guess it's always a matter of perspective. A protagonist doesn't have to be good, and their antagonists only their problem. Sorry for the bad grammar, running out of characters with all these long words. All right, so, yeah, I mean, antagonist versus protagonist, antagonist. Here's the deal. why does it matter so much? What decisions are you making as an author with this idea of protagonist versus antagonist that you couldn't make in just having your characters? Protagonists and antagonists, I think, are best for when you're analyzing a story like you would do in a literature class, where you can say, like, all right, everyone, let's get on the same page. The character that best represents the themes of this book is the protagonist, this character. And the foil to that, their main sort of pushback in achieving their goals, is this character, the antagonist. That's great for discussion, but I think you can fully make your book without having to break it down in that way. I don't give it a single thought when I'm writing about this idea of protagonist versus antagonist. I know my characters that I'm writing. I'm kind of figuring out their qualities, their fears, their quirks, their desires. And naturally, in a story, you want to have conflict. So you probably want to have some character that makes it hard for the characters you like to succeed. I don't go out of my way to say I need an antagonist. I just go, this would make a good story. Your mileage may vary. Sia Mori says, so what if it's for the progress of the plot? Like, what made the villain do the thing? What made the villain do the thing? Well, that's just making a character, more so than saying I'm going to make an antagonist. Like, this is the idea that, like, when it comes to characters, do you say I'm going to make an antagonist to fill this role in my plot? Or do you say I'm going to make a character that's realistic, that has depth? I don't know. I just see them all as characters that need equal attention, right? So, like, what made the villain do the thing? What made the good guy do the thing? It's their past, it's their decisions, it's their belief, it's their life view, it's their, it's the whole idea of, like, what makes that character feel realistic. It's their history, right? Your antagonist, in this case, your villain, in this case, is another character in your story, and you want to have the same sort of focus on that kind of stuff, right? So yeah, I mean, in the same way you would make a protagonist and put focus into helping understand why they are the good guy, why they do the things that they do, your antagonist, in this case, is just another character. Put the same focus into that. Why did they do what they did, right? Every James Bond villain has some reason why they're trying to destroy the world. It's because of X, Y, or Z. That's their motivation. If you want more information on the idea of, like, motivation... Wait, hold up. Let me rephrase that. If you want more information on the idea of motivations... I think I said that wrong. I definitely suggest... who was it? I think it was StoryGrid. Sean Coyne in the writing book StoryGrid. You can watch my video on it. StoryGrid by Sean Coyne. Why Your Book Feels Off and How to Fix It. Something along those lines is the title. And they talk about motivations, all the kind of good things like that. Making sure your characters feel good. And technically, isn't every character their own protagonist with their own antagonist in someone else's story? Are you my antagonist? You're messing with my head. That's something an antagonist would do. It's midnight and I'm wholly on the aren't we all just main characters in our own story train. Get off the train. All right. I'm still kind of on plot with this idea of hero's journey. Keep asking your questions about story. If something comes up about plot, let me know. But the reason why I brought up hero's journey is I think that this plot framework works best when you have this one, almost like chosen one character. And I really like stories like that. Like one of my favorite tropes in fantasy is like the chosen one, like I'm the one who can save the world kind of trope. I just think fantasy books like that are a lot of fun. I'm on a big quest to solve this issue. I'm the only one who can do it. And that's when hero's journey can really shine. Oh, we got Call Me Zed says, I really love the idea of two characters living in one body. I am working on a character that has a very similar thing happen to them in some planning that I'm doing. I was doing it today. So we're on the same page, Zed. There's some good storytelling that can happen there. Anakin was a protagonist until he was an antagonist. Whew. Preach. You either die a hero or live long enough to become Anakin, is the saying. There is a deep cut hidden gem fantasy book. If you like the hero's journey, if you like the quest narrative, especially if you like a really good bromance in a story, called The Ember's Blade by Chris Wooding. Sleeper hit. All the people who have already read all the big fantasy books swear by how good The Ember Blade is. But all the people who have still have to read Lord of the Rings and still have to read The Wheel of Time or still have to read Brandon Sanderson, it's going to be a long time until they get to this niche hidden gem book. But for you, it's not too late. Check out the Ember Blade. Question about the hero's journey. Why does it call for a mentor? Great question. Oh, I love that. Okay, so the hero's journey. At the beginning, it is critical for the hero's journey for this style of story that our main character not know things. Right, I was talking bromance, B-romance for the boys. That sounds weird. That is very little romance in the Ember's Blade, but there is some serious bromance. Okay, it is very important in the hero's journey that our perspective character, this hero archetype character, doesn't know things yet, right? So if you look at this graphic that we have here, we have the entire circumference of the circle that has all of these plot beats, but you also see we have the top half of this circle be the ordinary or known world, and the bottom half being the special or unknown world. Part of a story like this is that it requires our hero to get out of what they know and into a place where they are not prepared. Because you may be asking, why? Why do we need to do that? It's because us as readers, as the audience, we want to see the underdog grow in power. We want to see them overcome challenges so that they can be that hero that they were always meant to be. That's why they need to have a mentor, because when they start at this plot point 1 up here, right? This call to adventure. Think of Lord of the Rings with Frodo just being in the Shire, doing his thing, right? Think of The Wheel of Time, Rand al'Thor just like being a boy. Just being the boy, right? They don't know things about the real world, and it's only going through challenges are they going to learn about it. And we start off that with meeting a mentor. In Lord of the Rings, this is going to be possibly your Gandalf, possibly your Aragorn. Ugh! Speaking of Hero's Journey, Aragon by Christopher Paolini. That sounds right. Definitely a Hero's Journey story, right? We need to know everything that we don't know. And a mentor character is what sets us up as, put that sword down, person. You don't know what you're doing, right? Having that mentor helps us set up saying, like, this character, even if they're really confident, they don't know what they don't know. And yes, it does look like a Pokeball. So why do they need to meet the mentor? It's just part of that idea of, like, they don't know what's happening, and we need to know that they're not prepared for the real world. Because right following that, we are going to be introduced into a situation that we are woefully unprepared for. Frodo hiding from the Nazgul, right? Knowing that people are after him and he will die if they catch him. Rand al'Thor, I'm going to spoil the first 60 pages of the 16 book Wheel of Time series. Close your ears if this is something you don't want spoiled. If you don't want the first 0.01% of this series spoiled for you. Right? Rand al'Thor's village gets attacked. People are looking for him. That's a challenge that kicks off everything after that. And that takes us to our first threshold, which is We have a test of our skills, of our ability to survive before we then go into the unknown world. And usually we get by just through luck, right? Frodo outrunning the Nazgul, jumping onto the ferry, going to the Prancing Pony. What a good name for a tavern. Going to the Prancing Pony and trying to sort of like blend in and see the real world, right? I wonder what are some other good stories that everyone's seen that I can reference here. Because right now I'm just on Lord of the Rings. Ziamori says, what do you think about how to develop a side character that's introduced in late Act 2 or the middle of the story without rushing it and is an important character? Do you have an example? Okay. Side characters introduced later. So the first thing is, anytime you want a character to, if you need an audience, hold on. If you need an audience to understand your character and you need to do it fast, right? Let's say you don't want to waste time. You're in the late Act 2. Things got to be moving, right? The best way to get a hold of like who this character is not through, talking about who this character is. It's through the reactions of others and how they react to that character. When someone walks out onto a battlefield and the entire army stops and looks stunned at them, you know this person's going to be dangerous. If you as an author are describing someone walking out into this big old battlefield, yes, guy that hates bull, you can post your questions here. Big old bad guy walks out into the battlefield and the author's just like, he was big, he was bad. That doesn't hold as much weight. And this idea of like characters responding to a newly introduced character, that's a shortcut we can use for helping people understand. Hold on, I think the dogs want to leave here. Moose, you want to come say hi? Come here. Moose, come. Come on. You want to hop up? You want to go say hi? Hey. Moose, right over there. Come here. Come here. Come here. Hop up. Hop up. Moose, come. Come on, Moose. Yes! Ladies and gentlemen, Moose has entered the building. You're a star. You're a star, kid. All right, you want out of here? The dogs are like, let us out. This room is too small. Okay. Okay. All right, give me 1 second. Classic dogs. W Mooses in chat. Moose is a sweet boy, a sweet golden boy. Bailey, our Australian Shepherd, is too shy to come up here. She doesn't stand on people like Moose does. All right, someone says, I think The Road would be a good example of this. Many characters in that novel are minor, but they leave great impact. Yeah, this is the idea of concise writing, and it's hard to do. It is hard to go through and say, here is a character, and I don't want to spend a ton of time, but I want them to be memorable. You got to rely on things like reactions from other characters, maybe planting some seeds or breadcrumbs earlier in the story in regards to this upcoming character that we're going to meet, or I guess quirks, memorable quirks. Yeah. It's hard to introduce a character late in the story. I would probably refrain from it unless there was a very specific reason that they had to be introduced so late. And you want, so I'm just going to make up an example and you tell me how off of it I am. How off of it. So like with the idea of like introducing a character late in a fantasy novel, right? Let's say it's Lord of the Rings. If we have a character that gets introduced late in the story, and then they save Frodo from impending death, and that character then dies, it doesn't feel earned. That's one of the things to keep in mind. That's this idea of like Deus Ex Machina, right? Something comes in at the last moment and saves the day. So introducing a character late in a story that's going to play that sort of role in your story, you got to be aware of that. You might want to try to bring them into the story earlier on, or make sure they're not playing too big of a role in your story. The only thing I would say in regards to that, go in the opposite direction, is if your book is a series, and that character in the next following books are going to be like big boys. in the next books in the series. That can be a cool way to introduce a character and then set up the role that they're going to play later on. Any thoughts? This is from our very own sweet Danish pastry. Any thoughts on how to slowly build up a romantic attraction between two characters without it being too obvious what's going on? So this is something I've been looking into lately because I think romantic subplots are like a very human style of story, if you know what I mean. I found this one book on Amazon I'm about to do a deep dive into. It's a very short book. It should be a very short video. About romance. It's called, oh, you know what? We'll look it up here. It's called Romancing the Beat. Is that right? I think I'm going to go through this because I also want to get better. And I have a hard time reading romance. And I like to read things intentionally. Romancing the Beat. Okay, here we go. They got their own website. I edit kissing books. What's your superpower? Oh, hold on. Let me show you. There's this Romancing the Beat. Is all about story structure for romance novels. I was hoping there would be a little bit more here. Gwen Hayes. So I'm about to pick up this book and do a little bit of a deep dive in onto the romantic subplots. Apparently, this book goes specifically into building up tension between characters and doing it in a way that's not in your face, but maybe it's meant to be that subplot. So if you want to join me on reading that, I'll let you know in the Discord when I pick it up. Slowly building romantic attraction between two characters without it being too obvious. One trope, I can tell you one trope I really like, is when you have a new character. When you have a protagonist enter a new situation where they meet a bunch of new people and they identify, that character that they are starting to feel that romantic attraction with. And instead of doing anything active about it, they ask other people. Maybe they have that friend that's guiding them through everything. You saw this happen in Dune, right? They have someone that they're like, hey, who is that? Who is that character? What about her or him or them? Right? And then there's this moment of oh, they want to know more about this other character. I think that's really fun to do. That's a trope I really like. I'll let you know when I pick up Romancing the Beat. I'll post it in the Discord. It's a really short book. It looks to be like it's only going to be, less than 100 pages. But I'm also trying to get better with the romantic subplot. Call Me Zed says, how about when the main bad guy gets introduced around the end to give the good guys the beating? Okay. It can be done well. There is a book I read earlier this year. And I have to say it because I do want to talk about it. You know what? No, actually, flip it. I'm not going to say what the book is so that I can talk about it in more detail. Okay? There's a book that I read that spent the entire 500 pages of a 600-page book telling us that the big, bad, evil character was about to rise up and end the world. And the whole time, I'm thinking, dang, oh my God, you're about to rise up and end the world? Wow, that sounds like a good story. And I like that. I was like, that's cool. Build up the tension so when it happens, it's going to blow my mind. Now, they start planting the seeds for this in, let's say, page 100. And I'm like, all right, there's 600 pages left after this. This is going to be awesome. I get to page 200. They're still planting seeds. And I'm like, okay, cool. We're really building up. Page 300. Main bad guy has not yet been introduced. Page 400. Main bad guy has not yet been introduced. Page 500. I'm looking now. There's 200 pages left. And I'm like, man, when is this big bad character going to show up? Because I need that kind of conflict. It's been built up for so long. Page 600. Bad guy's nowhere to be seen. Page 7 out of, 800 pages. Main bad guy still not out. It was page 720 out of 800 that then our main bad character came out. It was huge. It was meant to be this big epic climax. I'm looking at the actual pages of the book like there's only a couple pages left here. This is not enough. One big conflict, main bad guys defeated, end of the book. I did not like that. I did not like that in a box. Stupid. Did not like that in some socks. So, if you're talking about introducing your main bad, here's the takeaway from this is, look, it's still got to be impactful. It cannot be a one-off thing. In an ideal situation, I naturally want to see and this is just in a generic story sort of sense, I naturally want to see your big bad guy come out. I want to see the good guys lose. I want to see that they were super prepared for this or something like that. This was their big plan to overthrow the main bad guy. I want it to go poorly. And then I want the good guys to still find a way to overcome. That's the generic story outcome that I think really works. And for this other book that I read, just having a big finale scene with the big bad in the final 80 pages of the book was not exciting to me. I spent the whole time being like, I feel like I've been robbed. All of this tension was built up, and this author is doing this really big, epic battle scene at the end. But I know how it's going to go. They're going to win. And they did. And that was that. So, that's my advice. Make it impactful more so than the example I just gave you. Do you know any examples of villainous protagonists with sympathetic sides? Oh, so many. So many. And most of modern storytelling that you look at now, once you get out of... Honestly, once you get out of things... look, here's a list of villainous characters with sympathetic sides. Who's the bad dude from Phineas and Ferb? Hey, there's your villain who's trying to do these things, but they never want to hurt anyone. They miss Perry the Platypus. I didn't watch that show that much. They're sympathetic. You also have Zuko, Prince Zuko from Avatar, Last Airbender. Great character who starts off as villainous, but of course has a very deep character personality. They're all over the place. I would say most villains in modern storytelling are going to be fully fledged characters with sympathetic sides. Modern storytelling now is more about that than it has been in the past. Right? Early James Bond movies, the bad guy was just a rich bad guy. Don't want him to win, you know? Oh, we got Jerica Bennett in the chat. Oh, Doofenshmirtz themselves in the chat. Is that really their name? That's tough. That's a tough one. I would have mispronounced that in my house and gotten in trouble. Right? Someone says, Gabby says, Prince Zuko is one of the best characters I've ever seen developed in any media. Yeah, that's a great one. Prince Zuko is iconic, right? And it was because, they were a realistic character. More so in the terms of, it really showed that there was a child who was very one-minded with what they had been brought up, and they were experiencing the world in a new way and learning things. And we like to see that as an audience. Whether you're watching a TV show or a movie or an anime or reading a comic book or writing a book or reading a book, we want to see characters not just exist, but develop. That's big. That's big. Danish Pastry says, I haven't played Baldur's Gate 3 yet, but I imagine Asterion could also fit the bill. From what little I know, he does bad things to keep himself safe, and he doesn't trust others. I don't know if I'll get in trouble. I never took Asterion one time in my party. Clearly, I must have been missing something because he went on to be an extremely beloved character. Never took him one time. I respect Will. So I had Will on my team, but I respect him to be a rogue. To fill Asterion's shoes, I took Shadowheart and respect her to be a mage. And I took Karlach and kept her a barbarian. Team Karlach. Actually, I was Team Shadowheart. I tried to be both, but it doesn't work. Tough life. Tough life. Sia Mori says, in my story, the main character really does a really bad thing to some important side character. And the plot has a fast pace, and I don't see much of a chance for forgiving and developing a bond. Okay. So, this is a redemption arc. You know? Let's go here. This is a redemption arc. Redemption arcs, I think, require time. I did a video on this book called Sinlin Ascends, and I talk about a character changing their worldview and about how I provided a framework for how to have a character undergo that sort of change. When you think you know how the world works and you're put in a situation or a place where everything you know is wrong, and then how do you come to terms with the fact that everything your history of a person is built on needs to then be changed to adapt to survive in this new location. So I check that video out. It's called Sinlin Ascends, the Character Flip Framework, I believe. And I think the same thing is true of redemption. There are some things that just take time, right? A character being truly wronged and then being over it too soon is going to be like one of these cardinal sins of writing. The reader is not going to like that. Something to keep in mind. Now, does that mean you can't introduce betrayal or something at, in the third act of the book and during the big climax? You definitely can. But that betrayal needs to be almost immediately followed, since you're already at the end of your book, with some form of a character actually regretting their actions, actually feeling like they messed up, and doing something equally impactful to overcome that, right? I love a good redemption arc. So, like, a good example, I'm trying to think of what would a good example of redemption be. Got no examples off the top of my head. Do you guys know any really good redemption arcs that's not Zuko? I would love to know. What do you think the best characters with redemption arcs would be here? Let's go here. Let's look it up. Best redemption arcs. Not impressed by what I'm seeing here. Prince Zuko's a good redemption arc. LMFAO. Yeah, we know. Vegeta in Dragon Ball. Hey, there you go. Jesse Pinkman. I've never seen Watership Down. Boromir. Ooh, that's a good. Okay. Amy, thank you. That's a great point here. All right, so Amy said a great redemption arc is Boromir. All right, and this is because it works because time was taken. All right, now time was taken to establish this character as someone who is not on board with the way that things are being done. Right, Boromir time and time again, and I'm referencing the movies here. Boromir time and time again is like, give me the ring. We can't leave it in the hands of these stinking hobbits. They're too little. We gotta get this ring, and or we can even use it. Come here. We could use the ring. We're men. We are the men. We could use that ring. That's what Boromir is all about. That's like his whole deal. It's like, hey. Right? So we have this foundation of this character who isn't quite approving of what's happening. And then what happens after all that? There's a moment where he does pick up the ring. And it calls to him. And then we're like, as an audience, we're like, dang, Boromir almost turned. What's he gonna do now? Now he like really wants the ring. And then we have this big battle, and all these Uruk-hai, right, meets back on the menu boys, are storming this mountainside looking for the hobbits, and Boromir tries to take the ring again. In a fit of rage, inspired by that ring. And Frodo puts the ring on and he runs. And then Boromir immediately, after this moment of trying to betray Frodo, immediately is like, uh-oh, I messed up. And he's like, no, Frodo. And so we have the betrayal, right? Not, 10 minutes later in this movie, what does Boromir do? He gives his life to protect not Frodo, but the other hobbits. Frodo doesn't even know that Boromir did this thing, right? And that's one of the reasons why it works so well, is because Boromir did it anyways. Redemption can be a tricky thing. There's definitely a whole video on the idea of the redemption arc. It's a good question. Shout out Boromir. All right. Any other character questions? I've been digging this. Any other character questions? There's a video I've wanted to do for a long time. Now, I've been trying to outsource this video idea because there's information that I don't have that I need to have. The video looks at all of the most famous and controversial reality TV characters so that we can understand how can we make characters as memorable as them. The only downside is I need a person who is extremely knowledgeable in reality TV, and I am not. I've barely started watching Survivor, which is really good, by the way. One day. I gotta wait for the next big reality TV trend, and then I guess I gotta hop on that one. What's the trendy reality show where is it Love Island, that they can't get freaky on the island but they're all really attractive? Wow. Tough life. Got any Love Island followers here? What up? I remember mid-pandemic, Netflix came in with Love is Blind. And then in the reboot of that show, we had another reality character who got real big because they were like, I get mistaken for Megan Fox all the time. You remember this? And then the guy on the other side who couldn't see her was like, dang, I really lucked out. And then they see each other and the guy is like, oh, remember that? That's what I need, another reality TV trend like that so I can hop on and actually understand and then make a video about reality TV characters. There's a great video there. Because, there's a great video in looking at reality TV and the characters there. Because those characters are not purely people, They're not like, man. Reality TV is not real. But it does have, legit, I'm so torn. Jerica says he wasn't much of a looker either. Did he say he looked like a celebrity? I will never ask anyone what celebrity I look like because I only get 2. What do you think? What do you think I get when people try to compare me to a celebrity? Take a guess. Big Wig spends pretty much the whole book/movie bullying Hazel. And then at the end, he becomes the hero rather than Hazel, the protagonist, by risking his life for them in a battle against the villain. Who was Big Wig from? Who was Big Wig? Did I miss who Big Wig was? We got 2 votes for Ed Sheeran. All right. Story time. I'll tell you a little story. So I used to travel for work right out of college. Watership Down. I need to read/watch Watership Down. Never have. I know what it's about. Never experienced it. So I used to travel for work. And this was out of college. I had this job for like 4 years. And they sent me all over the U.S., lots of travel, which was good right out of college. And then they sent me to South America for work for a week. And there were there were two things that happened. And first off, I was in a country in South America. Maddie Mullins from Memphis Mayfire. What the? I'll take that. Hey, how about that? I dig me some Memphis Mayfire. Maddie Mullins is a talented dude. I'll take it. First time I've gotten Maddie Mullins. Okay, so I got sent down to South America to a dang war country in the middle of a civil war. I was told there were certain colors I wasn't allowed to wear at the time because it would put me on one side of the war. I have some bitter feelings about about working with this company, specifically this specific event. Anyways, okay, I won't get too deep into all that. But anyways, I go to this South American country, right? I'm walking on the way to this work here, right? To the office, just doing my walk, and people pass me, and I keep hearing Chele. I speak some Spanish, not fluently or anything, not even conversationally, but Chele. I don't know what Chele means. I keep walking. And then I go to the people I'm working with. They were all really nice. They all spoke really good English. And we're chatting. And I mentioned, I keep hearing Chele in the street. They tell me that is leche backwards. Which leche means milk. And that's what they call white people in this South American country. So I walk by and they'd be like, hey, Chele. Hey, Milky. All right. And you think that's bad enough. But then I'm walking. Some people walk by and they do a double take. And they're like, Ed Sheeran? And I'm like, I wish. I wouldn't be here. Yeah, I'd be playing music. And then I'm walking this way. And then someone passes by and they're like, Ed Sheeran? It's a tough life. Tough life being a redhead. All right. Amy asks, how do you do characters with controversial worldview, but also keep them relatable? That is a great question with an easy answer. Great question, easy answer. Danish Pastry says, if they hold them because of their indoctrination, people might be sympathetic to it. That is exactly it. That is exactly it. If the worldview is built on something outside of their control, and they are willing to change, or they do undergo that change, boom, sympathetic, and it works. In the Sword of Kaigen that I'm reading right now, that is like one of the big kind of things, is in this like Asian influenced culture on this island that's all about warriors. They very firmly believe that a woman's role in the society is the homemaker. Right? And that birthing sons means that you're being smiled upon the gods and everything. But our main character in the story, who is the mom of this family, of one of these really strong families, is an extremely powerful and talented warrior. And that ends up saving a lot of heartache that can be experienced in the story. And our main character, who is involved in this indoctrination, I shouldn't say indoctrination. I mean, maybe the right way to say it is, their worldview has always been presented in that way where they were always, okay, well, maybe indoctrination is the word. They believe this certain thing about the role of a person. Seeing someone for more than that role of the person and it changing their mind means that character has an overall positive change. The reader is rooting for them, right? So it's not only is the reason of their worldview out of their control, it's that once they overcome that worldview and see things differently, that they make a positive change. That's how you keep them relatable, because that means we're rooting for them now. That's big. All right. Any other questions about characters? because I'm about to start talking about archetypes. Here's a question for you. How do you come up with a character? Because I think my process is backwards, but I kind of love it, right? Whenever I'm coming up with a character, a lot of it starts with like this idea of just like, I need a character to play a certain kind of role in a story. I am a fan of archetypes. I'm a fan of saying like, okay, I have a story. It has this kind of plot. It has this kind of conflict. We are in a story where there's going to be these natural story threads. This is also another thing before I get too deep into it. Familiarize yourself with natural storytelling. When you start looking at plot frameworks, instead of just saying, how does this apply to my story that I'm writing? Try to find, like Save the Cat has very specific plot beats that tell you like a general story. Not so much just, I'm going to put my story into these plot beats, but natural sort of setups and payoffs and all these things that happen to make a story feel satisfying. I'll try to figure out a better way to showcase that. Pilot Alex Watchman. I'm going to start saluting every time I say that. Says, how do you keep characters unique in personality? I often fall into the trap of making a bunch of characters all too similar. Similar to myself specifically. Oh, Pilot Alex Watchman, you've fallen into the classic trap. Let me tell you a story. I once, in my earlier days of writing, based just about every character on certain aspects of me. You should, base characters off of people that you know well, right? Maybe you don't know those characters well, but hey, you know yourself well. So then I would base these characters off bits of myself, right? Here's the issue. I try to be a logical, reasonable person. My wife may disagree, but I try to be logical and reasonable, which meant all of the characters that I was kind of basing on me as I was writing had these same elements of logical and reasonable. And let me tell you, that's a boring story. No one wants to read a story about a bunch of people who talk their problems out, understand where the other person's coming from, and then find compromises. Name one story. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So, you have to make a change. The first thing I did was I started finding out what is, even if this character is meant to be somewhat reasonable, what is the one thing that this character would react unreasonably to? So let me give you an example. Let's say you have a character who when they were young in their life, they had a loved one betray them that impacted them for the rest of their life, right? Maybe it was a parent abandoning them. Maybe it was a sibling that did something bad. Maybe it was a trusted person they put their faith in, and then that was broken, right? It spurned them. Years later, this character has a light betrayal, a lie, a fib told to them by someone else, and they react unreasonably to it. That makes sense in the history of that character. Having every character have something where they react unreasonably to means that every character has some, not trauma. Not every character needs to have trauma. There are some character frameworks like the YouTuber Local Script Man says that so much of your personality is based on the trauma you encounter earlier in life. And so their character sheets reference that. I'm not saying this is a trauma-based thing, but there should be some element that your character doesn't respond reasonably to. And, hey, bad news. If I'm the author, I'm putting that character in a situation where they're not going to like it. Because you want that unreasonable response. It makes for good conflict. So that, and just trying to create realistic characters in the terms of why do they believe what they believe? Why are they good at what they're good at? What are their faults? What are their strengths? Not in the sense of like rolling a D&D character, but you know what? It's not a bad place to start. The more you do it, and the more time you spend writing your character, the more you uncover about them. That's another good thing here. The character that you have on paper when you start writing, it's not going to be the same character that you have at the end of that story. They're going to go through a massive change as you better understand them. They may start out similar, but as you figure out their role in the story and how they can provide conflict and resolve conflict, and that's done by writing and being in those moments in the story, they will get a more wholesome, you will get a more wholesome understanding of them. Gabby says, I just kind of vibe them. This is how they make characters. I just kind of vibe them. That's one of the reasons I have so many male characters in my stuff. I usually come up with all of them when I'm crushing on a fictional character. But usually characters come first for me. So I'm usually asking myself, how do you people come up with a plot instead of the other way around? Because I already have the character. You've heard me say this time and time again. I don't know if I need to repeat it. I believe planning all of these different things happens concurrently. This is the idea that, like, as you're planning your story, you're never done with one section, like your characters, and then start planning your plot and finish that, and then start planning your setting. Every decision that you make in these different areas is going to influence something about the other areas. I did the story breakdown. In hey, Random Writer, welcome back. I have the story breakdown coming out on August 20th alongside a fantastic book, a new release, Starlight Farms, Kennel for Talking Dogs. Let's go. August 20th. I did like a super detailed story breakdown that I wrote as I wrote this book. And so all of those things like how do you come up with characters and setting and plot, or whatever the thing may be, I actually have a stream of conscious in that little ebook PDF thing I'm going to be sending out that tells you exactly the thought process that led me to the details here. So you can see exactly, like, coming out of my brain as I was planning, I was typing in the story breakdown. So I hope you find that useful. It'll be free. You can make sure you sign up for the newsletter little email thing on writingtheory.com. If you don't know where that is, watch any of the videos about this book. Coming out for free. Not the book. Please buy the book. Do you have any favorite archetype? This is from Danish Pastry. Do you have any favorite archetype interactions / combinations? I love seeing two very different people sort of clash over, but eventually figure it out. Yes, we are the same person. I love it. I love it. Do I have a favorite two? Oh, man, that's really hard. That's really hard. I don't know if I can say I have a favorite two, but I do have some favorite archetypes that I lean on when I'm doing my own sort of story planning and story writing and everything. And that is, I love a good swashbuckling character. What do I mean by that? A swashbuckling character is sort of like the charismatic, really good at things, a little cocky, always has a quip kind of character. Think Flynn Rider in Tangled. Think Will Turner and Johnny Depp in Pirates of the Caribbean. What would be some other good swashbucklers? Think if you ever saw, there's this movie that I don't know if anyone else saw. I thought it was way bigger than it was. It was called, what's his name? Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. Voiced by Brad Pitt himself. Here, let me pull it up. Maybe you'll know this. I actually rewatched this to study how to better write a swashbuckling character for an upcoming book. Legend of the Seven Seas. I wonder if anyone knows this movie. Does this look familiar to anyone? I love this movie growing up. I watched it a ton. We had it on DVD. I don't even know how I stumbled upon it. I don't think it was very popular. Random Writer loves the swashbuckling characters. Yes, same. Wings of Fire. I don't know if I've ever heard of Wings of Fire. Deathbringer is a hardcore name. Can you imagine having your friend come over and be like, "Hello, Mom, this is Deathbringer"? We want mac and cheese tonight. I made my characters like a tree branch so that there's backstory connected. I made them into a group, and then I can block out their arc, so I'm working on them. What about you? Did you have this problem? You're not... All right. I did this. Gabby saw the movie. Glad to hear. I did think I was a little crazy as I started researching. I looked at the Wikipedia and the IMDb page for this movie, and it seemed like it was a very much kind of a not popular movie. It looks like The Prince of Egypt. Yeah, very similar in the art style. You can also study archetypes and write a short to practice writing different personalities. Definitely. Heard this movie, never seen it. I mean, it's not a fantastic movie, but it's one of the few swashbuckling movies that's come out recently, you know? It's kind of hard to find swashbuckling characters in modern media. So I watched this and I studied it. I for real was like, okay, you know, they state the character's theme in the first 15 minutes. Are you a hero or a thief? Our character struggles with it. Our character tries to leave but can't. Our character has this question asked by another person. They have to come to terms with it. There's 3 main events that happen in the middle 50. There's a big climax where they answer this themselves. It's I was for real studying it. All right. So we had Sia Mori ask about... I made characters like a tree branch. There's a backstory. It's connected and made them into a group. So you have an event and then all the characters that are joined by the event. I showed this on the last stream. Was there anyone here who was, in the last stream? I should check out Dragon Prince. I think I'd like it. Was there anyone here who was in the last stream that we did? Because I'm about to show you something. Most people are not going to like it. Okay, J-Sam was there. Love it. Love it, J-Sam. Okay. I'm going to open up my Scrivener file for Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs. And you're going to see how much planning goes into one of my characters before I start writing. He might be mad. Zed, welcome. Glad you joined us, by the way. All right. Let me do this. Let me switch this to this other scene. Random Writer was there briefly. Guys, thank you so much for being in the stream, though. This has been a very fun kind of thing. And I had no idea how it was going to go, so I really appreciate it. All right. I am probably more of a pantser than I am a plotter. And this is what that looks like. So in Scrivener, if you don't know, in Scrivener, which is a fantastic program for writers, if you want to have a dedicated all-in-one writing platform, highly recommend you pick it up. It is best if you're writing on the same machine as opposed to maybe if you write in a bunch of different places and you need to have something that's more cloud-based. But Scrivener, awesome tool. So, what does planning a character look like for me? Well, I can go over here into my character tab here for Scrivener, and here are all of my main characters. I'm too poor, so Scrivener, you use Readsy. Hey, whatever gets you writing, honestly. So if I open up Rachel Tilton, my main character, this is my full character sketch. We had someone on we had Ted on the Discord today share a 16-page character sketch, and here's mine. Right, this is a couple sentences, very very little. Right, so this is I like to cast my characters, so I always have people who are playing the characters, and this is it. But the thing is, this is starting image of the character. This is very like general detail. And that's it. And when I start writing, I give myself the chance to expand on that in whatever way the story calls for. I have found personally, and you may have a different process. That's totally okay. But I have found personally that if I try to put all that effort into planning a character, there's going to be something that happens in the first 10% of the book, and I'm going to go off script. And that's going to throw off other plans, and I'll be torn in either not changing the character I'm working on and instead keeping them similar to the sketch I started with, or possibly screwing up later plans for things that were going to happen in the novel that relied on that character point. And this expands to everyone. I mean, like, here's our other character, Marcus. That's the full character description. We have our bad guy. That's his full character description. And in the process of writing the story and understanding, in the midst of writing, the role that these characters needed to play, I was able to... First, I tried to get it right in the proto draft. But at the end of the proto draft, after I had gone through and done all of this... writing and slowly figured out the role that these characters were supposed to play. Then, as I was bringing that proto draft to first draft, I went back and I reaffirmed all that stuff. I tightened everything up. Now, the first time we meet Dartman Velish, our bad antagonist character here, like we were talking about earlier, now I know better the role that they're supposed to play in the story. I know better their motivations and fears and why they're doing the things that they're doing. So I go back to how we introduced that character, and now I can do it right. And that's how I found, at least in writing this past book, that's what worked best for me. Danish Pastry says, I draw my characters while I work on that. I'll automatically come up with a bunch of details on who they are. It seems like that works really well. I think drawing them is probably the same kind of thing that you're experiencing that I am when I'm doing the proto draft. You're just spending time with them. And that's really what you need. Maybe you could say planning a character is the act of spending more time with that character. Maybe that's the case. And if that gets you where you need to go, perfect. Get writing, finish that proto draft, get your story out there. If you find yourself only ever planning and not writing, this may be one of the reasons why. You may have done too much planning. I started on a script today for how to stop planning and start writing, and I sort of came upon this thought that I thought was really good. I'm going to share it with you guys here. That way you can tell me if I'm wrong. If I'm in an echo chamber and I'm just like not doing well. I came across this idea that planning a story and writing a story are two very different skills. And that planning a story is way easier to practice than writing a story is. Planning a story, you can't really do it wrong. You can always adapt and change, and there's very little stakes in messing something up. While writing, if you mess something up 20,000 words in, how does that affect the hours of work that you've already done previously? Very different, very hard, much harder to practice writing than it is to practice planning. I don't know. Interesting concept. Gabby says planning is for people who are ready to throw away the plan because it's going to happen eventually. In the wise words of Lance Hunter, you make a plan turns to rubbish, we make a new plan. That's right. Phantom says, I usually come up with a story first and then base the characters around it, but lots of times I find myself making an entire story based on a character, and that's totally all right. That's awesome. You can have a great story that's based around a character, especially if that's going to be a character that we're rooting for and following, you know? Totally fine. Jay Sam says, LOL, looks like my layout. My daughter can never understand how I could get 48 pages out of one sentence. Built different. Random Writer says, my phone died. I'm back now, but I was going to ask, what's a proto draft? I love the proto draft. First off, before I even go on the rant, there's a proto draft video made earlier this year on my channel. Go out and check it. Go watch it. It answers all the questions. The proto draft is the single thing, the single change to my writing process that made this possible. That made finishing any project possible. The proto draft is what comes before your first draft. The first draft, for some reason, us as writers, and I know I'm not the only one here. The first draft, when you start writing it, it's so easy to get immediately caught up and demoralized as like, this first draft isn't good enough. What am I going to do? Why am I going to spend 40 hours typing on a story if I don't think this first draft is going to be good? And there's so many things that you do that you sort of just talk yourself out of doing. There's this like mental gymnastics, anxiety, all kinds of stuff. Phantom says you're in for a hell of a time. Yeah, I'm very passionate about the proto draft. The proto draft is what you write before your first draft. Some people might call it draft 0. Some people might call it, I wouldn't go so far as to say it's a rough draft. I still think rough draft is kind of first draft. But the idea is that the proto draft has one single purpose. It is to make sure you keep writing. You never stop. Don't know how to do a scene? Skip it. Jot some notes down. Move on to the next scene as if you wrote it out. You're going to be editing. You're going to come back to all of this stuff anyways. Don't let one measly little thing stop your whole book from being done. That's the proto draft. There's a lot more in the video. I'll save all of this other stuff from the people who are aware of what the proto draft is. Go watch the video. It's called The Proto Draft. Yeah, it's a good one. It's a good one. Danish Pacer says, I feel like I can do neither sometimes. The other times I sit there like I'm a genius. I don't have any of those moments, the I'm a genius parts. Pilot Alex Watchman says, I'm definitely the over planner. I plan out stories often to the smallest detail and it never ever gets written down. Yeah. I swing the other way, personally, when it comes to planning versus plotting. I didn't think I necessarily did until I started writing, and I found, you know what it was? It was really important for me to read Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Somewhere on my bookshelf. Here, I'll show you what it looks like. Hold on. I don't need you to see me stand up here. I'm in shorts. No one wants to see that. This is a writing book I highly recommend. It is not the perfect writing book. It is not the best writing book of all time. But it makes you feel really passionate about writing. Makes you want to write. It's the style that Anne Lamott writes in makes it feel like a friend's just talking to you and like a warm hug. But the big thing, the thing I needed to hear the most from this book was that when you write characters, they're not going to be great in the first draft. I don't know why. I never figured that out. It's only after spending time with those characters and getting through that first draft, that proto draft, that you learn about who they are. And then you go back in your editing and you make it so much better. I needed to hear that. That was a piece of writing advice I needed to get. So Anne Lamott, shout out. J Sam says, the hardest thing for me is to stop editing. Pro tip, do not do a single lick of editing until your proto draft is done. That editing is going to drag you down so much. The proto draft, if you have, J-Sam, I don't know if you've seen that video or not. I can't remember. The proto draft is all about, there's a dang gnat in here. Proto draft is all about getting your story down start to finish. You're going to do editing later. right? And that's how it should be. You should write, go back later, do your editing. But if you write a chapter and go back and edit, first off, you could never be done editing. Actually, tomorrow's video is how I edited Starlight Farms Kennel for Talking Dogs. It takes you through everything I did to get it from proto draft to the final draft that I uploaded on Amazon. And in there, I talk about how if you really wanted to, you could be editing forever. And you're never going to get the perfect story. Your story is going to keep changing. You're going to keep making simple grammar mistakes and spelling mistakes every time you write. So you're going to do copy editing or line editing. And then you're going to read it and you can say, I can make this part better. The idea is like, you could choose to be a perfectionist, but I don't think you will ever put something out if that's the case. At some point, you got to put your story out. I talk about it in the video tomorrow. In 22 hours, you can find that video. We'll be doing a premiere, so it'll be just like this kind of live stream where you can chat with people and watch that video together. But yeah, editing, do not do it while you write. I'm telling you, you will never move on. Danish Pacer says, Abby Emmons also has excellent advice on the initial anxiety. She says to write ugly at first and like it doesn't have to be perfect. But it's better to have a bad draft than to edit than nothing. The famous advice. You cannot edit a blank page. It's true. You got to put something down at some point. So yeah. Let's see if there's any other cool things in my Scrivener I can show you guys. In that story breakdown I'm putting out, I have my plot framework. Here's my actual plot framework from this book. Let me see if I can get it centered here. Broken into Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and Act 4. And all these different chapters. It says chapters in here. That's just verbiage. But these are all the major story beats. In that story breakdown, you get this entire piece of text. If you want to read what the initial plot framework is and how it compares to the actual book, you can get that. I thought that would be helpful. It's kind of stuff I wish I had access to. And now that I guess I am a content creator, that's something I can provide. So I got you. Kiera says, I'm editing my book right now, and I made myself read the first few chapters on my phone as if I was reading someone else's work, and I actually loved what I had written. That is awesome. Yeah, there is something really nice. It's really hard to put into words, which is crazy because we're writers. It's really hard to put into words the feeling that you get if you read something of yours and you think it's good. Yeah, it's really nice. This is one of the reasons why a lot of authors say when you finish your proto draft, before you start doing any editing, wait like 2 weeks. Try to forget those details and all the things you liked or hated. So when you come back to reading your draft, it feels like the first time you're experiencing that story. You can look at it through newer eyes. That's a really big, important point. Yeah. I have my proto draft right over here. After I finished writing my proto draft, I went to the print shop. And I printed out my proto draft. And here's all my notes from proto draft to first draft. Right? And I read through this whole thing in a coffee shop. I tried to do it all in a coffee shop. Then I had to go home because I was at a coffee shop for 4 hours. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Siamori. Thank you for joining us. We're about to wrap up the stream here, too. Thank you for joining us. It was a lot of fun. Jay Sam says, I think that video's on my list to watch. It can be beneficial. The first time I read this, it was a very good feeling. There were definitely lots of things I marked to fix, but there were things that I really enjoyed reading, and moments that I laughed, and moments that I teared up. So that was awesome. All right, before we wrap up for today, let's call last call for any things you guys want to chat about. Character, plot, writing in general, writing theory, future stuff. Is there anything? We'll open this up and then probably wrap it up in the next 5-10 minutes. Kira says, I'm going to try it with the other chapters when I finish editing and writing them. Yeah, definitely. I recommend, this is just my advice, just my recommendation, try to write your whole story before you edit. Get it all the way through. You're going to be doing, it's probably took me like 5, I've probably read my whole manuscript 6 times in the process of writing and editing. So you're going to do a ton of editing. Right now, focus on your writing. Finding yourself crying over a scene you wrote is real. Yeah, this, I have it in the Amazon description. I didn't put it on the back of the book. I went into this book with a mission. Let me tell you what that mission was. It was to make you happy cry. To make you tear up and cry happy tears. I hope you do. Tommy Zed says the trope about the bad guy being just the good guy but evil. Yeah, I mean, I guess we had a bunch of questions today about how to make an antagonist feel like a real character. Treat him like a protagonist, but evil. Gabby says, one question about the proto-draft. How close to an actual book is it? Like I had in my mind, it could be something like a Wikipedia plot summary, but it seems like it's closer to the actual story. The goal of the proto-draft is to get your story down from start to finish. And that is writing the actual scenes. But it also means if you encounter something that would leave you stuck, you don't let that derail your entire process. You make some notes. You know, this scene is supposed to accomplish these things, and you move on to the next scene, right? That's a big thing. How close is it to the actual book? In terms of things like writing style, you know what? Best thing I can tell you, Gabby, is the video that comes out tomorrow is all about the changes I made from proto draft to final draft. That'll answer all your questions. Random Writer says, how do I write a sad scene without it being melodramatic? Great question. Wow. Love it. There is a writing book I just read recently. It's called Dialogue by Robert McKee, and it specifically talks about avoiding melodrama in your story, in your dialogue, in your actions, all of that. And the big thing about melodrama is that melodrama occurs when someone reacts in a way that is too much, whether it be too happy, too sad, too angry. Like if someone is slighted in a very small way, reacting to someone like you're dead to me is melodrama, right? How to avoid melodrama is remember your characters. If your goal is to present your characters as realistic people, then avoiding melodrama is just writing realistic characters, right? Use the references of the people you know. How would they react to this situation? You know, realistic people are going to try to survive. Realistic people are going to try to understand in most cases, not all cases. So yeah. Avoid melodrama by keeping your characters grounded. Danish Pastry says, I'm curious, who did the cover for your book? Her name was Louisa, and I found her on Fiverr after looking for like 2.5 weeks for an artist that I wanted to work with. I edited and recorded the video this week that explains all the publication stuff I had to do. So choosing a title, choosing a cover, choosing my blurb, putting it on Amazon, all of these kinds of things, choosing the size of the book and the text and the font size and the margins, all of that good stuff. That's in the video next week. But the artist's name was Louisa, and I can't remember her last name. But I actually have a screenshot of her Fiverr page in the video for anyone who is interested in giving her more work. She was very awesome. So she was a Fiverr posting I found. All right, any other last questions before we wrap up? I'm going to give it a couple minutes because I know there's a delay. But we'll probably be done in the next 5 minutes. Hope you guys had fun today. I think the live streams are fun. I hope that you guys find them as engaging as I do. It is really nice just to know that there are people who kind of want to hang out with you and talk story and have a good time. I see the hearts in chat. Can I send them too? How do I do it? Big hearts in chat. Ooh, big hearts, big hearts. Love it. All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up, everyone. Thank you so much for everything. I really enjoy hanging out. I'm getting a little bit better. I'm not perfect, but I'm getting better. It was a fun stream. Call Me Zed Says, learned a lot. That's the goal. If you're not already in the Discord, check it out. And then maybe one day we'll get some people in here that aren't from the Discord, and it'll be a whole new world that they can experience and grow in writing. When are you planning on hosting another live stream? So the reason I did these live streams, I'm kind of testing the waters, but my wife is out of town for work. So I was like, hey, I can do whatever I want now. Don't clip it. Don't clip that. It is a lot of fun. But also, I think I'd rather keep them for like maybe big events. I'm planning on doing live streams all throughout November, maybe a little bit before and a little after. We're doing Novella November in the Discord. I will be doing writing sessions, writing streams, answering questions in this live stream during that month to help you finish your proto draft for your very own novella. And we can do it, for sure, for sure. I will be writing right along with you and finishing something right along with you. You got me back into writing, editing your book. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for interacting with the stream. It is so much fun just to talk with people. So yeah, I will let people know in the Discord if there are any other live streams planned. But up until then, I would look forward to late October, November, and early December as we go about planning a novella, writing the novella, and editing the novella. I'm going to help you put out your very own book if you'll put in the time. That's the only requirement. So yeah, I'll see you guys then. Thank you so much. Keep on writing. Write on in the free world. You're the best. I got to find the stop streaming button. I'll see you later. Take care. Goodbye.